The Denver Museum Gala wasn't supposed to be memorable. It was one of those polished, obligatory social events filled with overly cheerful greetings, softly lit hallways, and just enough champagne to dull the sharp edges of small talk. Joanna had been excited about it, though. She'd mentioned the event twice that week, specifically noting that she'd be meeting with the curator earlier in the day to help with some last-minute preparations. That wasn't unusual. She worked in art consulting and often floated between gallery circles and museum boards. I didn't give it much thought. She kissed me goodbye that morning with her usual practiced affection, dressed immaculately in a cream blouse and navy skirt. She smelled like citrus and lavender. The scent lingered in the kitchen for hours after she left. I arrived at the event just past 7. The museum's exterior was draped in warm lighting and classical music drifted out from the main hall. Inside, everything shimmered, people in gowns and tuxedos milled about under high ceilings, murmuring in that particular tone of cultured enthusiasm. I scanned the crowd for Joanna but didn't see her right away. That wasn't unusual either. She had a knack for floating effortlessly between social groups, always in motion, always somewhere else. After grabbing a drink and making a few obligatory rounds, I slipped toward the dressing area tucked off a side corridor, one of those backstage corners where women retouched makeup and men straightened bow ties. I only went there because I thought I might find her fixing something in the mirror or maybe stepping out from a quick call. But the room was empty. Well, almost. On the polished vanity counter lay a bracelet, silver, simple but elegant, the kind of piece you notice because it doesn't try too hard. I stepped closer. It wasn't Joanna's. I knew that immediately. She was sentimental about her jewelry. Each item had a story, a place, a memory. She wore her grandmother's gold chain, her mother's pearl studs. This was new. It was cooler in tone than what she typically wore, and engraved along the inside were initials H. The letters didn't match anyone I knew. Not from her work, not from our circle. I picked it up, studying it a moment longer before sliding it into my jacket pocket. I don't know why. Maybe I told myself it was just to keep it safe until I could ask her about it. But even then, something in me felt different. Off balance. I left the dressing area and headed out toward the terrace where the air was crisp and the city lights sparkled beyond the railing. That's where I saw her. Joanna was standing near the edge of the terrace, her back slightly turned toward me. She was laughing softly, head tilted in that easy, familiar way, but it wasn't me who had said something funny. A tall man stood in front of her, light-haired, broad-shouldered in a way that made his tailored suit look more relaxed than formal. He leaned in just a bit as she spoke, then rested his hand casually on the railing beside hers. Not touching her. Not quite. But almost. The closeness was an asterisk mate. Not overtly physical, but definitely personal. Their body language wasn't what you'd expect from strangers or even friendly colleagues. I watched them for a full minute, unblinking. Joanna's smile had that softness I hadn't seen in a long time. She wasn't just amused, she was connected. Engaged. My grip tightened around my drink and I stepped back before they could notice me. I didn't want to make a scene. Hell, I didn't even want to confront her. Not yet. I wasn't sure what I'd seen and I wasn't ready to name it. When she found me later near one of the sculptures, she was composed and glowing in that way she always seemed to be after these events, half energized by attention, half exhausted by pretending. She reached for my arm like nothing had happened, asking if I had tried the fig crostini, if I had spoken to the Whitfields. Her eyes were bright, voice light. I waited until we were in the car, halfway home under the city's amber lights, before I mentioned it. Someone left a bracelet on the vanity counter, I said casually. Silver. Had the initials H on it. There was a pause, short, but not short enough to ignore. Oh, she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Probably someone else's. People forget stuff all the time at these things. Her voice didn't waver. She didn't look at me. Just kept her eyes on the road ahead, fingers gently fidgeting with the corner of her clutch. I nodded, pretending to accept the answer, but inside, something twisted. She hadn't asked what it looked like. Hadn't shown even a flicker of curiosity. Not the way she usually would when something was left behind. Joanna liked puzzles, details. This time she just moved on. Redirected. I stared out the window, listening to the quiet hum of the engine. My fingers brushed the inside of my pocket where the bracelet still rested. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the dark living room with the bracelet resting in my palm. The initials stared back at me. I wondered who H was, how long he had been around, and why Joanna hadn't mentioned him. But more than that, I wondered when she had stopped sharing pieces of her world with me. When had I stopped noticing? It wasn't just the bracelet. It was everything around it, the way she seemed to retreat into herself these past few months, the way she no longer laughed at the dumb jokes I used to tell during breakfast, or the way her phone always seemed to be face down on the table now silent. The bracelet wasn't proof of anything yet. But it was a crack. And through that crack, everything else began to leak in. I didn't sleep much that night. Joanna lay beside me, her breathing slow and even, her back turned in the way that had become her default position over the past several months. It used to bother me the way she curled toward her own side, like the space between us didn't need to be bridged anymore. Now I just watched the ceiling, that bracelet still heavy in my pocket like it was trying to drag me into a different reality. The next morning I woke early. She was already in the bathroom. I could hear the soft rhythm of water from the shower, followed by the familiar click of her phone unlocking. That sound, quick and hidden, triggered something deep in my chest. Joanna never used to take her phone into the bathroom. Not like this. Now it followed her everywhere, hallway, kitchen, grocery runs. She had turned off notifications a few months ago, claiming they were too distracting. "I get enough noise from work," she'd said with a tired smile. I believed her. I believed a lot of things. I waited until she left the room and stepped in. Her towel was still damp on the rack, steam lingering on the mirror. But the phone was gone. Again. She had changed all her passwords recently, too. I only noticed because I had tried to log in once to play music from her playlist on the smart speaker and hit a wall. She shrugged it off, said it was just for security. "Work's been weird about stuff lately," she claimed. Work. Always work. But as I stood in that steam-fogged bathroom, staring at our reflections blurred across the mirror, I started to run back every red flag I'd waved away over the past year. She had grown more private. It started small, pausing phone calls when I entered the room, taking longer walks alone after dinner, always with some vague explanation. And then there were the sudden bursts of cheerfulness. Forced. Manufactured. Like someone trying too hard to maintain an image. Smiles that never quite reached her eyes. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the spot where she had been just moments earlier. Empty, warm, fading. A memory came back. Just a few weeks ago, she'd pushed me to take that fishing trip with my brother. It wasn't like her. She always thought those weekends were a waste of time. 2 days of mosquitoes and bad reception, she used to say. But this time she insisted. Practically packed my bag for me. She even booked the cabin online without telling me. Back then I chalked it up to thoughtfulness. Now I saw the outline of something else. She wanted space. Not just any space, but space with a clear timeline. Time where she knew I wouldn't be home. Where she could move freely. Comfortably. I found myself at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee I barely tasted, watching the seconds tick by on the microwave clock. Joanna moved through the morning like clockwork. Hairpinned, makeup subtle, heels that tapped across the hardwood. She kissed my cheek out of habit and said she'd be late, meeting with a potential client, might run long. I nodded. I didn't ask for details. I didn't have to. After she left, I opened her laptop. It was a long sh*T. I knew she rarely used it anymore, preferring her phone or the office computer, but it was worth a try. It booted up. No password change. That at least gave me a tiny sense of false comfort. I checked the browser history. Clean. Too clean. It had been wiped. I sat back in the chair and stared out the window at our neatly trimmed backyard. The garden she used to tend to was overgrown. Her gloves still hung on a hook by the shed, untouched. Like everything else, she had slowly stepped back from it all. And I had let her. It wasn't until I opened the downloads folder that I found something. A photo. Just one. A group sh*T from some gallery event, her colleagues, dressed in black, standing in front of a painting I didn't recognize. There, off to the side, was that man from the gala. Light-haired. Confident. His hand resting just behind Joanna's back. The file name was H_gallery launch. Initials. Nach. I felt my chest tighten. I stared at his face. He had that polished look, good skin, charming smile, the kind of man who knew how to command attention without asking for it. He looked too familiar with her. Too settled. He wasn't just someone from work. Not anymore. I closed the laptop. The rest of the day passed in a fog. I went through the motions, answered emails, took a client call, even picked up groceries just to keep my hands busy. But my thoughts circled like hawks. Everything she'd done, every late night, every carefully crafted excuse, every quiet moment where her mind was somewhere else, it all pointed to the same truth. This wasn't random. It wasn't an accident or a lapse in judgment. It was intentional. Methodical. She had been building a separate life piece by piece, right under my nose. And I'd been too wrapped up in routine, too trusting to see it coming. That evening, she came home later than usual. Her eyes were tired and she said she'd had the longest meeting of her life. I nodded. She poured herself a glass of wine and didn't offer me one. Instead, she walked to the back deck and sat alone, scrolling on her phone. Smiling at something. Probably someone. From the kitchen, I watched her silhouette against the fading light. She looked peaceful. Like someone who had already moved on from something but was still playing pretend. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more than suspicion. I needed confirmation. Evidence. Something undeniable. But most of all, I needed to stop lying to myself. This wasn't a phase. It wasn't stress or burnout or distance caused by time. It was a pattern, one I could no longer ignore. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You start to notice every stitch, every fray in the fabric. She had been pulling away from me for months. Maybe longer. And I had finally begged *N to feel the unraveling. The idea to come home early wasn't premeditated. I had wrapped up a meeting downtown and, instead of heading to the gym like I usually did, I just drove home. I told myself I needed rest, a quiet evening. But deep down, I think I already knew. Or maybe I just wanted to give her the chance to prove me wrong. It was 4:37 p.m. when I pulled into the driveway. The house looked exactly as it always did, white shutters, rose bushes by the porch, her car parked neatly where she always left it. From the outside, everything was ordinary. Calm. But the moment I stepped inside, something was off. The air was still. Too still. Our dog, Charlie, didn't come running like usual. I realized his crate was empty and the leash was gone from the hook. She must have sent him to daycare. That alone wasn't alarming. What stopped me cold were the shoes. 2 pairs rested beside the door. One pair was hers, flats she wore when she wanted comfort. The other? Men's dress shoes. Not mine. Polished brown leather, size too big to be a guest making a quick visit. I didn't move right away. I just stood there, keys in hand, listening. Then I heard it, soft laughter. Faint. Coming from upstairs. My heart rate kicked up, but my hands stayed steady. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and started recording. It wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't even about proof, not exactly. It was about clarity. About stripping away any room for doubt. The hallway creaked under my feet as I moved toward the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly. There she was. Joanna sat on the edge of the bed, wearing a robe, hers, the navy one I bought her last Christmas. Her hair was up, still damp from a shower. She held a wine glass in one hand. Beside her sat the man from the gala, in the flesh. Same easy smile, same confident posture. He wore a t-shirt and slacks, no socks, one hand resting on the bed behind her. A bottle of Malbec sat on the nightstand. 2 used wine glasses. A folded blanket at the foot of the bed. They didn't look startled. That's what hit me hardest. They didn't flinch. They looked up at me like I was the one who had made the mistake. Joanna's expression didn't twist into guilt or panic. Just resignation. Travis, she said, setting the wine glass down, you weren't supposed to be home yet. I didn't speak. I kept the camera steady. A few more seconds. Then I stopped the recording, turned, and walked out. She didn't follow. I don't know how long I drove. I just remember the sound of my own breathing, loud and sharp inside the car. I ended up parked behind an abandoned warehouse, staring at the cracked brick wall, my hands frozen on the steering wheel. I replayed the footage once, just to make sure it was real. It was. Everything I had tried to dismiss, the late meetings, the changed passwords, the forced affection, it all coalesced in that one frozen image, her on the bed with him like it was just another Tuesday. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. What I felt was something quieter. A kind of collapse. Like the last beam of a building giving way after years of unseen rot. That night, I didn't go home. I checked into a hotel on the edge of town, paid cash, left my phone in the glove box. I didn't want to talk. Didn't want to hear her voice or see her name pop up on my screen. I ordered a drink at the hotel bar and sat there for hours, ignoring the muted sports commentary on the overhead TV. I didn't even touch the drink. The next morning, I called my brother. "You all right?" was the first thing he asked. "No," I said. "Can I stay with you for a while?" His cabin was tucked up in the mountains near Boulder, just far enough to feel disconnected but close enough that I could still pretend I hadn't run away. I drove up without telling anyone else. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just silence. My brother didn't ask many questions. He handed me a beer when I arrived and said, "You've got the upstairs bedroom. Sheets are clean." I didn't show him the video. Didn't need to. Over the next few days, I existed in slow motion. I hiked. I sat by the fire. I let the mountains hush the static in my mind. I replayed every conversation Joanna and I had over the past year, rewinding for clues. There were so many. I saw them all now. She hadn't just fallen into something. She had been building an exit ramp for months. And I had let her. There were no fights. No screaming matches. Just distance. A quiet decay. And then her retreat into a world where I didn't exist. Where someone else filled in the blanks I had once occupied. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what version of me she talked about when I wasn't around. Did she describe me as cold? Distant? Did she lie about who I was to make space for who he could be? I stopped wondering after a while. The answers didn't matter. What mattered was the truth I had seen with my own eyes. And that truth was simple. She had chosen him. She had chosen him not just in a moment of weakness, but in 1,000 little moments before it. Every lie, every deflection, every calculated omission, it was all a breadcrumb trail that led to that bedroom. I didn't hate her. Not exactly. What I felt was something sadder. I missed the version of her that once loved me. The one who used to reach for my hand without thinking, who used to laugh until she couldn't breathe. I missed someone who no longer existed. And I didn't know how long I'd been loving a ghost. The bracelet was still in my jacket pocket. I hadn't taken it out since the night of the gala. But now, in the quiet of the cabin, I held it up to the light. The initials gleamed H. I wondered if she even knew he'd left it behind. Or if he had ever meant to. Either way, it didn't belong in our house. And neither did he. And now neither did I. The mountain air hit different. Cleaner, thinner, like it didn't have room for half-truths. Up at my brother's cabin, life was stripped down to the basics, wood heat, strong coffee, and the kind of silence you can hear settle in your bones. I arrived with nothing but a duffel bag and the weight of what I'd seen. My brother didn't push. He gave me space, quiet meals, quiet rooms, quiet understanding. We split firewood together that first morning without speaking a full sentence. Just the crack of the axe, the thud of split logs, the cold biting at our fingers. It was exactly what I needed. My phone stayed off. I knew there were messages waiting, Joanna, probably, maybe friends who'd heard something or sensed a shift. I couldn't bear to open it. The idea of seeing her name on the screen made my chest tighten. Even if she was sorry. Even if she wanted to explain. I couldn't hear it. Not yet. For the first few nights, sleep came in fragments. I'd lie awake listening to the wind against the windows, wondering how long she'd been gone from me before I noticed. I kept replaying that moment at the bedroom door, how natural they looked, how undisturbed. There was no scrambling to cover up, no rush of guilt. They weren't surprised. They were comfortable. That part hit harder than anything else. I watched the video once more. Only once. It was short. Still. Cold. I didn't watch it to punish myself, I just needed to confirm that I hadn't imagined it. Afterward, I deleted the file and emptied the trash. Gone. Like the man I thought I was with her. The next day, I stood on the deck for a long time, staring out across the trees. The cabin sat high enough to see the peaks stretch in every direction. It was humbling. The silence here wasn't empty, it was full of everything I'd ignored for too long. Joanna had grown quiet over time, but so had I. It wasn't just her who changed. I had pulled back in my own way, buried myself in work, routines, distractions. We had become two people living next to each other, not with each other. But there's a difference between distance and detachment. I never stepped outside the bounds of our marriage. She had. That distinction mattered. My brother tried to pull me into conversation over dinner. Sports, mostly. Work. He offered stories about his coworkers and bad dates, little distractions I appreciated even if I wasn't ready to respond in kind. I listened. Nodded. Grunted in the right places. He didn't press further. At night, I wrote in a notebook I found on a shelf upstairs. I filled pages with thoughts I couldn't say out loud, frustrations, regrets, unanswered questions. I wrote down everything I wanted to ask her, everything I knew she'd never truly answer. Why him? When did it start? Did you miss me at all? The questions didn't help, but writing them down made them smaller, contained. By the third day, I started to move again. Real movement. I chopped wood until my hands blistered. I went on long hikes into the ridge trails. I carried a thermos of coffee and sat on a rock overlooking the valley, just listening. The quiet started to change. It wasn't oppressive anymore. It was something else, something honest. That night, I made dinner. Just pasta and garlic bread. My brother raised an eyebrow, half amused. Figured you were gonna live off jerky and sorrow, he said. I smirked. First time I had in days. Bread helps. He nodded, then added quietly, you're doing better than I would. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just not breaking. That counts. The days blurred. I stopped checking the time. I watched the light change through the windows, followed the shadows as they crept across the wooden floor. I read half a novel I found in the cabin's small shelf. I wrote more. Not letters. Not journal entries. Just lines, thoughts, fragments, ideas about who I wanted to be once the dust settled. The idea of going back still felt far off. Not just to the house, but to the life I had before. I couldn't picture sleeping in our bed again. I couldn't imagine sharing a kitchen with her or sitting across from her at breakfast, pretending everything was recoverable. Because it wasn't. Some betrayals don't scream. They whisper over time in the things we ignore. The absence of touch. The forced smiles. The calendar full of meetings that never happened. When you lose someone piece by piece, it takes longer to grieve. You don't realize you're mourning until there's nothing left to hold onto. One morning, a week after I arrived, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. The stubble, the dark circles, the hollowness in my eyes. I wasn't just tired. I was worn out. Weathered. But there was something else beneath it. Resolve. Not anger. Not bitterness. Just a quiet determination to move forward without looking back too hard. I had seen the truth and I couldn't unsee it. There was no fix for what had been broken. And for the first time, I felt okay admitting that. I was sitting on the porch when my brother brought me a beer and nodded toward the end of the driveway. You gonna go back soon? I stared down at the bottle in my hands. Thought about the man I'd seen in the mirror. Not just yet, I said. He nodded. Good. You're not ready. Neither of us spoke after that. We just sat there, letting the night settle in around us. And for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like peace. It was almost 2 weeks before I turned my phone back on. Even then, I hesitated, staring at the blank screen, thumb hovering over the button like it might set off an explosion. When it finally lit up, the avalanche of missed calls and unread messages hit me like a punch. 39 texts from Joanna. 7 voicemails. 3 from my parents. A handful from friends. A few unknown numbers. But one stood out. Jared. That surprised me. Jared wasn't just a passing acquaintance, he was Joanna's gallery director. We'd shared drinks after openings, the occasional dinner when I tagged along to events. Always professional, always polite. He struck me as someone who lived life carefully, the type of guy who ironed his shirts before breakfast and always knew the right wine to pair with duck confit. His message was simple, call me. You deserve to know. I sat with that for a while. Then I dialed. He answered on the second ring. His voice was quieter than usual. No pleasantries. Travis. Yeah. I'm sorry, man. I wasn't sure if I should say anything. But I've been sitting with it too long. He paused. I didn't interrupt. I just waited. It's Ash Hansen, he said. That's who she's with. The name hit like a bell rung too close to the ear. I didn't need the confirmation. I'd seen his face, seen the way she looked at him, but hearing the name out loud made it real in a different way. I know, I said. I figured that part out. What you might not know, Jared continued, is that you're not the first. I blinked. What do you mean? Ash has a pattern, he said carefully. He's not just some guy she met at an event. He's made a name for himself in the gallery world, but not just because of his work. Everywhere he goes, there's drama. Affairs. Scandals. Always with women who are already taken. Married mostly. He let that sit for a second. I didn't want to believe it, Jared said. At first, I thought Joanna just admired his work. She talked about him constantly after he came to town. Kept saying he had vision and edge. But then I started seeing it, the way she lit up around him. The late hours. The closed-door meetings. Same playbook I've seen before. I leaned forward in the cabin chair, phone pressed tight to my ear. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't know how, Jared admitted. It wasn't my place, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. But when I heard she wasn't answering your calls, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I let out a long breath. How long? I don't know for sure, he said. But I guess months. At least. That word again. Months. Every time I heard it, something inside me withered a little more. She hadn't tripped into this by accident. She had planned it. Chosen it. Sustained it. Do you think she's serious about him? I asked. There was a pause. I think she's serious about escaping. That stung. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I'm sorry, Travis, he said. For what it's worth, a lot of us saw the change in her. We just didn't know what to do with it. I hung up not long after, thanking him for the call, for the honesty. I sat there for a long time, phone cradled in my hands like it might fall apart. My reflection stared back at me in the dark screen, hollowed out, older than I remembered. Ash Hansen. I Googled him. Of course I did. His name popped up in glossy articles, art world features, profile pieces that fawned over his charisma. Photos of him at openings in New York, Los Angeles, Miami. Always standing beside women. Always smiling. Always charming. And always moving on. The further I scrolled, the more the cracks appeared. Rumors. Anonymous blog posts. Comments on forums. Whispers of broken marriages. A pattern of seduction wrapped in sophistication. And Joanna? She was just another story now. Another one of the wives. I shut the laptop and stared out at the mountains, trying to anchor myself in the present. It wasn't just about Ash. It was about Joanna. She had let him in. She had welcomed the chaos. She hadn't been manipulated, she had chosen this. That was the hardest part to swallow. Not the betrayal. Not even the infidelity. But the conscious, deliberate nature of it all. She hadn't been lost. She'd been done. And instead of ending things honestly, she had opted for secrecy, deceit, and the illusion of control. That night, I sat with my brother on the back deck. We didn't talk much, just passed a flask back and forth while the stars came out. At one point, he glanced over and asked, "You gonna go back?" I shook my head. "Not until I'm ready." "You think she's waiting?" "I think she's rewriting the story." He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. The next morning, I opened my phone and finally listened to the first voicemail from Joanna. "Travis, I know you probably hate me. I don't even know where to start. I messed up. I know I did. I just need to talk to you. Please. Can we meet? Just talk. I owe you that much." Her voice cracked halfway through. It wasn't performative, it sounded tired. Frayed. But it didn't move me the way it might have 2 weeks earlier. I didn't hate her. I didn't even feel betrayed anymore. What I felt was clarity. Ash Hansen wasn't the problem. He was a symptom. A reflection of something already broken. Joanna hadn't been stolen. She hadn't been misled. She had simply reached a point where she no longer saw a life with me in it, and rather than say that out loud, she had created a side door and slipped through it. Jared's call had sealed it. There was no more guessing. No more wondering. And that meant one thing. It was time to stop hoping for answers from her. The truth had already arrived. Not with fireworks. Not with a dramatic confession. But in fragments. From strangers. From patterns. From the silence that filled the house before I ever caught her. And from that truth, something else emerged. I wasn't the one who broke this. I was just the one who refused to stop believing in it. A week later, she came to the cabin. I hadn't told her where I was. I hadn't answered her calls or texts. But somehow she found me. Maybe Jared gave her the address. Maybe she figured it out on her own. Either way, I wasn't surprised when her car pulled into the gravel driveway, kicking up dust behind it like some ghost arriving late. She stepped out slowly. She looked tired. Not disheveled, Joanna never let herself go, but drained. The kind of tired you can't cover with concealer or coffee. I didn't move. I was sitting on the porch with a mug of coffee, legs stretched out, a blanket thrown over one shoulder. She walked up, stopped a few feet away. "Can I talk to you?" she asked. I stared at her for a long second, then nodded once. She sat on the porch steps, not beside me, just close enough to be heard. There was a silence. Then she began. "I don't even know how to start. I've been rehearsing what to say for days, and now that I'm here, none of it feels right." I didn't say anything. She looked out at the trees. "I messed up. That's obvious. But it wasn't just the affair, Travis. It was before that. We lost something. Or maybe I let it go. I don't know. I thought I could handle the distance. I thought it was just a phase." Her voice cracked, but I kept my eyes forward. "And then Ash," she hesitated. "It started slow. Conversations. Coffee. I didn't go looking for it, but when it came, I didn't stop it." I finally turned to look at her. "Has it happened before?" I asked quietly. She blinked. "What? With anyone else?" "Before him." A long pause. Her eyes dropped to the floorboards. "Once. A long time ago. It didn't go far. But yes." And there it was. Not rage. Not betrayal. Just the final nail in something already buried. I stood, coffee still in hand. "There's nothing left to fix," I said. "Whatever this was, it died before either of us admitted it." She looked up at me, eyes glassy. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said. "But you still did." She stood, brushed her coat down. "I'll go." I nodded, stepping aside as she passed. She hesitated at the top of the steps. "I did love you, Travis." "I believe you," I said. "But love isn't the same as loyalty." And with that, she walked to her car and drove away, tires crunching over the gravel until all I could hear again was wind through the pines. 2 months later, the house was mine again. Not legally, those details were still being sorted, but spiritually. Her things were gone. The air was clearer. I could move through it without the shadow of what had happened clinging to the furniture. I'd found a rhythm. Morning runs. Weekend hikes. Freelance work that let me feel useful without drowning in routine. The quiet wasn't haunting anymore. It was honest. I didn't think about her much. Until I did. One afternoon, I saw her online, photos from a new gallery opening. She was in them, smiling beside someone new. Not Ash. Not someone I recognized. Just someone. And I felt nothing. No anger. No ache. Just a distant kind of understanding. She was still searching for whatever she thought she'd find. I wasn't part of that journey anymore. Our home, my home, was quiet now. Not from absence. From peace. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Myself.